Welcome to the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago's first online conference in collaboration with the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. As you know, the theme of our conference is the future of online learning quality, best practices in artificial intelligence and competency-based credentialing. Dr. Thackwray Driver has been the Chief Executive Officer of the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Debra Ferdinand-James, Educational Technologist and Lecturer in Workforce Development, the University of the West Indies, Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Hyacinth Guy, Principal Director, Hyacinth Guy Human Resource Company, Trinidad and Tobago. Our first presenter in this session is Dr. Thackwray Driver. Dr. Driver.
So good afternoon, I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for having me. I am the CEO of the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago. We are the industry association which represents the oil and gas industry, the petrochemical sector, and all the service companies and contractors. I'm going to present as quickly as I can this morning on work which we have been doing on skills development, prior learning, assessment and recognition, and why that's important to us in the oil and gas industry. So let's go in. First, yeah. So the issue in the energy industry which we're trying to address is that there are pockets of or large pockets of the workforce in Trinidad and Tobago in the energy industry who are skilled, experienced workers, but they have no certification to show their skills. We are particularly focusing on the workforce which accesses the turnarounds in the plants in Point Lisas. So these are the large petrochemical projects, and you have these major scheduled maintenance programs where you may get up to 1,000 individuals going onto a plant over a few weeks to implement these major maintenance projects. And in that group, and on the screen there, you'll see sort of what the breakdown of the sort of skills are. Large numbers of people who would fit in the plant fitter class, and then you have other fabricators, instrumentation technicians, electrical technicians who go onto these plants to implement the projects. Many of these people have no certification to show their skills. That becomes an issue because then the client who is bringing the people onto the plant doesn't know if the people that they're coming on actually can do the work that they are being brought on to do. Then there are also then sort of issues around the process safety of whether the work is being done properly. That also even gets into issues around insurance. So the operator companies, the owners of the petrochemical plants, are increasingly asking their contractors and service company members, the contractors and the service companies who provide services to them for these activities to prove that the workers are certified. And that has become an issue which we've been trying to deal with. So we've gone about that in collaboration, very close collaboration with the National Energy Skills Centre. We have an MOU with them, and we work very closely with the NESC, who are established as a partner to deal with exactly these sort of problems, making sure that we have skilled workers for the energy sector, as their very name suggests. So we have been using, because these are existing workers, we're using PLAR type methodology to assess the competency of these workers. So these are not young people coming into the labour force. These are people who are already in the labour force, who have some knowledge and some skills, but no certification to show that. So in 2016, we signed an MOU with NESC to work on this issue and to try to make sure that we can certify the knowledge of the individuals who are going on to provide these services within the petrochemical sector. But this slide here, not to go through the details of it, but it's the basic model that it's a partnership between the Energy Chamber and the NESC with a national training agency, the NTA, providing the job standards and certifying what the job standards are, saying that they meet the right standards, mapping them against the CVQ or the TTNVQ, and then onto the CVQ, so that when we assess people's skills, the idea is that we can be delivering them eventually with CVQs, which they can use both in Trinidad and Tobago and in the wider region. That is the vision. What we have really managed to do so far has been more of just working between ourselves and the National Energy Skills Centre. So we have the job standards which we have developed in the industry. Those have been signed off by the NTA, but we're not really able to certify people against those to provide them with a TT-NVQ or a CVQ. But what we do is we use those at NESC to assess the candidates. So how the system works is that the individual workers will come into the offices in Point Lisas, into the energy chamber. They will register with us. We will then schedule the times when they go across to the National Energy Skills Centre, just around the corner from us, and they will do the assessments there, and NESC will then provide a transcript showing the assessment which was conducted. We then take that transcript and put that information onto something called the Plea Card. This is a card which all workers within the energy sector, in the petrochemical sector, and the LNG industry in Trinidad have to have this card to enter any of the facilities. So that data is captured on that database on the Plea Card with a barcode reader. And so when the individual worker then goes to the petrochemical plant and they need to prove evidence that they have this skill area, it's a simple matter of scanning the barcode on the card, and the details will show up pulled from the database. We do that through the basic assessments by which we give people their plea cards comes through the Energy Chambers Learning Centre, and this is just a photograph of the centre which we have here in Atlantic Plaza in Point Lisas. It's a computer-based centre, and at that centre, people come, individual workers come, every day, and they will come in, they will sit down and do an assessment of their basic health and safety knowledge. This is the main way in which people get their plea card. They will come in, they will do this assessment, and as long as they pass, that will be recorded and they will be given a card. We do around 14,000 people a year in a typical year will come through that centre to do this basic assessment of their HST knowledge, and the data gets captured onto their card. Obviously, this year with the COVID restrictions, we had to shut down for periods of the year, so the throughput is a little less this year than has been in past years. But it's about that sort of level of 14,000 people, and they have to come once every 2 years. So we know there's about sort of 28,000 people who are in our database. That also gives us data about the individuals as well. So we know that 88% of them are female. Are male, and just 12% are female. Obviously, there's a very a big gender imbalance within the sector. We know that the vast majority of them are Trinidadian, who are working in the industry here in Point Lisas, about 99%. And we know who the non-Trinidadians are. We'll only put people into the system if they can prove that they have the right to work in Trinidad. So that's the basic data you'll see there. So that is the plea card is. And we've taken that infrastructure which we have for the plea card, and we add on now into that same database the information about the individual's skill levels through this process. These are the numbers of people we have assessed using this process. About 400 people have come through this system. I should have said at the beginning, this is being paid for primarily by Methanex, who have 2 large methanol plants here in Point Lisas. Methanex are sponsoring the individuals to get this certification. They pay a small fee to us in the energy chamber to register, but Methanex pays the majority of the fees associated with doing these assessments at the National Energy Skills Centre. The primary skill area is as plant fitters. This is a sort of a basic skill area which we have developed the job standard for, so that's the major one, but we also have fabricators, and riggers. There's been a few other skills as well, a few people as carpenters. There's actually roles for carpenters on these projects to make form work for pouring concrete, for example. But those are the skills which which we are assessing. And yes, it's been a successful program. You will see that most people who are assessed are competent and are successful. There are some individuals who are not. We see problems coming up with basic literacy and numeracy, which affects some individuals' ability to actually to be certified against the system, and that is one of the issues which we have to work with. We have been working with NESC that there is some remedial training that we're giving to individuals, but there needs to be more work in that area as well, to have the remedial training given to people to bring them up to the necessary standard. So those are the numbers. And Methonex has been very good at sponsoring this process, and their support has been very important. But I think actually more important for me, the success doesn't come from the numbers, it comes from the people. And there's a couple of photographs here from the graduation which we did with Methonex in 2019, when Methonex had some of the individuals who received certification of their skill levels through this program. Pre-COVID days when we were all standing closer together. What to me is really important is that some of these guys I'm talking, guys and women I'm talking with, and they tell me this is the first piece of paper certifying any skill level that they have ever had in their entire life. So these are people in their 30s, 40s, even in their 50s, who've gone through an education system, ended up with no certification, and started working, never had any certification, but are skilled workers. And they're now getting a piece of paper actually saying that they can do the job, which they know they can do because they've been doing it, but they now have that evidence in place. And that to me is a very powerful thing. And we need to be able to recognize and to see that there are large numbers of workers in Trinidad who are skilled, who are not certified. We need to recognize their certification, and we need to create a pathway for them to move from that first level of certification into new levels of certification of their skill areas. And the other benefit is that it improves the work which people are doing. This is a big benefit from the point of view of Methonex. They want to make sure that the people who are coming to work in their facilities know what they're doing, so there's less rework. The projects can happen on time and within budget. Obviously, every delay with a petrochemical plant is a major cost, because you have the plant is down and not producing while you have the projects on. So making sure that projects happen efficiently, safely, is hugely important. So that is that part of the benefits. Where we want to get to in the future is be able to move from the system, which it's sort of working for the current need, which is what the industry is asking for. The industry here in Point Leases is asking for just the basic certification of skills, to move that into a system where we can get people with CVQs, so that they can then move around the Caribbean, and we can make this part of the Caribbean single market and economy. There are lots of opportunities for our skilled Trinidadian workers to be able to move into Guyana, Suriname, elsewhere into the region, into Barbados, etc., wherever there are opportunities. If we have people with CVQs in their hand, it gives them that power to be able to find new opportunities and to transform their lives. So on that note, I've been given the buzzer, and I will end and take questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Driver. Our next presenter is Dr. Debra Ferdinand-James. Dr. James.
Good morning, everyone. I am Debra Ferdinand-James, and my background is in workforce education and development. And lots of times persons ask, like, what do you do with that kind of degree? Well, we actually bridge that gap between industry and the educational institutions, so that we can inform what we're doing in the educational institutions. So as you heard, my former job, I partnered with industry, always working to assure that the changes that are taking place are also reflected in the programs that are offered in the institution, so that we have that nice complementarity, as you have heard before. So I think where we're at is actually building capacity for this whole move to micro-credentialing. and more so in online learning towards workforce development. As you know, and as you've heard, we are now, we have been, not now, but we have been in the fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0. And that was preceded by the third revolution, which focused more on computer and automation. So that in the workforce, you have a number of employees and the industries who have a foundation in computer and automation. But with the fourth industrial revolution, we have heard, the machines are now talking to each other. So they create a cyber physical system linked intelligently through artificial intelligence, and that is fueled by the internet, so that the information that goes through those machines, for example, if you place an order for a product, that goes straight through these cyber physical systems. The entire processes are, digitized. And so what you have happening is a higher level of productivity and need for skills, as you have heard, in machine learning, data mining, and so on, robotics, so that these workers would just need to upskill. If I could just show you, they would just need to upskill now to having these kinds of skills to be responsive to that kind of digital transformation that's taking place in industry. So that's one side of the workforce aspect of it. But the pandemic has pushed the working and learning online, so that we now need some additional skills. Now, before that, upskilling might have been done within the industry, or it might have been with a training provider, as we heard by the previous speaker, NESC and so. But that now has to be done online. So now you need some additional skills for that kind of remote, working remotely and learning remotely. And you have to know how to now navigate learning management systems, how to conduct web conferencing, and how to use those tools as we are doing now. And so that's where the immediate need for the micro-credentialing comes in. And of course, you've heard what they are. Thankfully for the open campus of the University of the West Indies, they already had some of those systems in place. And for particularly the teaching workforce, where we were actually pushed back in March, the university is now fully virtual because of the pandemic, and also our school system. And so there were a number of teachers, and not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but across the Caribbean, that needed some of these skills to deliver the online learning. I am going to just look briefly at what those badges in micro credentialing looks like. I hope I can bring that up. And so the university was very instrumental, that is the open campus, was instrumental in filling in where the gaps were. So for example, I had up there the course room facilitation techniques. You could have gone to the open campus and look at doing one of these short courses. So if you click here, this is on a platform, as they had indicated to you. They have partnered with Credly, and this is their Acclaim platform, a credentialing networking provider. And so you can see here, you would have to do this course for 2 weeks. These are the skills that you would have mastered in the course. And then once you have done that, the Open Campus would have submitted your completion of the skills and competencies to the Acclaim platform, and your badge would have been issued and validated through Acclaim. So this is how the system works. Let's see if we could just get back to the presentation. Okay. So that's an example of, meeting the immediate need. You don't have to go and do an entire degree in computer science or a whole distance education degree, but you upskill to those particular skills you need for delivery. For example, how do you set up breakout rooms? How do you assign students to breakout rooms? Those kinds of immediate micro skills. I myself, as an educational technologist, my part of my role at the School of Education is to provide support for our faculty in terms of tech support, introducing them to educational and technology tools so that they can deliver the type of training and education that is in line with 21st century learning. But that was done mostly, those sessions, those tech support sessions were done mostly face to face. And so when we went online, while I had my badges from the open campus, because I teach there part time, I needed to formalize and look at a way that tech support could be provided in an online way, but a way that is in keeping with what is expected. And so I had to look around, and Murray State University actually was offering a badge in planning a virtual academy. And when I got onto the platform, I met a number of other participants. We had participants as far as Dubai from different countries, mostly from the US. And I had to I had to learn that, within a month so that I can then explore with the other ed tech and the AV techs at the School of Education how to set up a virtual academy or a professional learning academy that would supply the needs online of the faculty and also respond to the recent quality review we had, which indicated that the training that our faculty received needed to be recognized. So before this never happened, actually, it was just like on demand. You needed to know, how to do a particular thing, use a particular tool on, like for example, Blackboard, Collaborate, and you would connect with me, and I will do a one-on-one session. Or if a lot of persons needed the same type or had the same request, we'll do a group session, and then that's it, and you move on. But the quality review indicated that there should be recognition for such training. And so I had to explore. I knew this was happening, but I myself am now building capacity to see how we can now offer that in the form of badges. Or, okay, I'm hearing some feedback. And of course, you have heard the badges should be competency-based. So whatever we're doing has to match the actual skills or standards that have been established by the Open Campus, for example. And so whatever we're doing, the badge will reflect that those standards, the evidence produced, have been met. Um, it is based, as you know, the credentials are research-based or backed. And so the research has been done to show that these specific skills are needed for that specific task. And this is what it takes to demonstrate that task. This is the evidence. And once that is achieved, you can be issued the badge. The badge is also on demand, as you know, because of this pandemic that has pushed us, all in a virtual mode. You can now access this kind of micro credential on demand so that you don't have delays in being responsive to the changes that are taking place. As I have done, I had to learn how to set up that virtual academy within, it was 30 days. We had 1 month to do it. And of course, it's shareable so that faculty can now share this with on their resume, if, for considerations for job promotion. They can put it on their Facebook pages and so on. So I am actually giving you a live example of myself actually engaging in these micro credentials, because I am in a sense a change agent, and all of what you are sharing here this morning has helped me to inform what, the changes that would have to be made going forward. And it's just so rich, and I'm thankful for the ACTT in inviting me and asking me to participate. I think the challenge in building capacity for the training institutions would be breaking down their program content into smaller stackable skill sets. As you know, that would lead to larger certifications, and have these recognized as a micro credentials to support lifelong learning, because we whether we want to accept it or not, the advancement in technology has pushed us into being lifelong learners. So for example, uh, deeper learning, one of the core competencies would be helping the student master the core academic content. Now, that in itself can be broken down as shown here by this would be desire to learn. It can be broken down into smaller skill sets, sorry. So for example, mapping concepts, that in itself could be a micro credential. And if you don't have the time at the moment to do all of it, at least you can choose the one that is in keeping with your biggest need for your students. So creating visual maps of what students think are the key concepts in a topic to be learned before and after the study to see effects of the learning process and for deeper learning. And so this is just an example of how facilitators, instructors, and so on can access these micro credentials while they are teaching and responding to those critical thinking needs of students, such as knowing how to map concepts. Oops, I think I missed one. And we've heard already for the industry, they too have to now partner with the training institutions and credentialing bodies to develop that system of micro credentials to promote that professional growth in the organization so that it remains competitive and responsive to the needs of the market. If industry is not able to do that, then they lose their customer base and even new customers to those who have gone that way, because their customers would be expecting a certain level of digitization in their processes. So in the online learning environment, one of the things that we can use for in terms of taking advantage of artificial intelligence, and we've heard this already before, is looking at introducing and building capacity for chatbots. These are conversational robots, and it's a computer program capable, of interacting with people using a natural language. And they're available 24/7, unlike us, because we are human beings. We are not available 24/7. And I'll just share a little bit about what or how they can be integrated into online learning. They can be used as intelligent tutors for students, particularly in subjects that are complex and demanding, like your physics and your chemistry, where the tutors can actually give them hints when they're doing, when they're focusing on areas, practicing on areas that are difficult for them. The intelligent tutors will not give them the answers right away, but they give them hints as to how to solve the problems. And in that way, that kind of formative sort of assessment when they're doing their exercises and so would give them, once they see success and they have that foundation, it would give them motivation to take on harder problems. The chatbots can also give them feedback on what they're doing. so that along the way in that formative learning and assessment, they know where they are falling short, and the feedback would help them to move forward quicker rather than have to do a summative assessment and then find out, this is what I don't know, and I may get a failing grade as a result. It can also be a teaching assistant to the facilitator, as you have heard before, with all the grading that's done, and help to identify where students, the weaker students, and give the facilitator an idea of the skill sets that are needed to be focused on, moving forward. The chatbot could also be an alternative to a learning management system, giving students access to repositories and particular types of documents and that they need to do research. It can also act as a mentor to guide students, making suggestions about information searches. I have found that our students are not traditionally hardcore readers. They just want enough information to do what they have to do. They're not into just exploring information, and there's so much of it out there. So the chatbot could be a mentor in helping them with their information searches for completing assignments or doing research. And the chatbot can also be a partner to practice your skills with. So let's say you're doing interviewing, you're taking a course on how to conduct yourself in an interview, what answers you should give, what questions. The chatbot could actually be the interviewer in a way, ask you the questions, and then you give answers and then give you feedback. So these are some of the ways that the artificial intelligence can be used to help us in online learning. I know a lot of what I've touched on has been said already, so I'm not going to labor it so much. These are my references, and I'll end here and take any questions afterwards. So I hand back over to the ACTT.
Thank you, Dr. Ferdinand-James. I now invite Dr. Hyacinth Guy to present. Dr. Guy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'm Hyacinth Guy, and I'm an HR practitioner, and I'll be speaking from the perspective of a practitioner who would have implemented a competency-based program in an organization some years ago, which really had all the tenets of what it is we are talking about now, and which continues to operate in that organization. Dr. Driver talked about micro-credentialing in the oil and gas industry, and this is very much along the line of what we did when I was at PowerGen some 20 years ago. I spent some time there. I left in 2014, and during the period 1997 to 1999, we introduced this program in PowerGen. It is still there, and it is still functioning. And I just want to share my experience with respect to how we did it, what it is we wanted to achieve, and what problem we had, and how this fits. How it fits so well with what it is we are talking about today in terms of micro-credentialing, and of course having that synergy between industry and academia. So if you can go to the second slide, please. So what I would look at is the problem we had in the organization. This was a newly formed organization. It was an organization that was hived off, as we know, from TNTech. The power generation assets was hived off from TNTech, and that organization operated with a new governance regime, in that it had a certain penalty regime if it did not perform the way it was expected to perform. So when we looked at that, we knew that we had to design this organization in a way that was different from what existed before if we were to achieve the goals that we had to achieve. So we had a problem, and I'll talk about that. We wanted to achieve certain things. We took a particular approach, and I'll talk about the implementation and the result, and then I'll talk a little bit about how I see the role of ACTT and also academic institutions in this whole system. So if we move to the other slide, you'll see the restructuring problem. We did have a problem. We had to restructure the organization, and we had at the time that we were moving to look at these jobs, we had already done a lot of the restructuring in the organization. We had looked at the organization, we aligned it with the goals that we had to achieve, and we had already done the job analysis, designed the jobs. It was significantly different from the jobs that we had before. We had already put in place at the management level a competency-based management system with incentives for getting skills and upgrading and so on. And we had to do something very similar in the operations and maintenance department. So this system that I'm going to be talking about was implemented in the operations and maintenance department. So, but the thing is, we had already done much of the restructuring, including a downsizing of the organization. And we had to ensure business continuity even as we built up the knowledge, skills, and abilities and the competencies of the people in the organization, because we couldn't just let everybody go and hire a new people to come into the organization to do this work. We wouldn't get those people. A lot of the learning and a lot of the training in power industry takes place on the job. Yes, people come in with academic qualifications, they come in with some training, but so much of it takes place on the job. And we had to ensure that people continue to do what had to be done, even as we moved into that new system where we had the new jobs in place. And in doing so, we had to give people credit for what it is they were already doing. So to move ahead, we had to capture, we had to recognize and use what the employees had, and at the same time chart a way forward and have them move ahead with us as we charted that way forward. And we recognize that the traditional assessment method of measuring classroom training was inadequate for that purpose. And we had to find different assessment tools to measure and recognize the class learning inside and outside of the classroom. As Dr. Driver said, we have people in organizations and they come in, they are skilled, they can do a lot of things. Some of them had qualifications and skills, some had skills but no qualifications. So in moving ahead, we had to recognize what people had, what they could do. We had to have a system to evidence that, and then we had to take them through the process of getting them qualified in the other areas that we needed them to be qualified in. So if we move to the other slide, we'll see what it is we wanted to achieve. Simply, we wanted to align the organization with a new set of goals. So we can move on to the other slide. We wanted to align the organization with a new set of goals. And in doing so, we knew that we had to set up an objective training and analysis system that would identify the needs, recognize the competencies that the employees already possess, and those competencies that benefited the organization, and then we had to chart a new way forward for them to develop the new competencies. In doing so, it benefited the organization, and it also benefited the employees. Employees had career mobility. They would have had a sense that as they learned new things, they are moving up in the organization, and at the same time, it benefited the organization in that as they learned new things, they demonstrated those things on the job, and the organization benefited. So what was the approach? If you go to the other slide, we will see what was the approach. As I said, we already had a competency-based management system at the management and professional level. That system used upgrades as an incentive for learning and for transferring learning in the workplace. So we leveraged this and we said, okay, we have to have something very similar at the operations and maintenance area. These are technical jobs. You have technicians, in the instrumentation, in the mechanical, in the electrical fields, highly skilled. But a lot of this skill came from being on the job. As I said, some people had, the MET and the Triple ET, but not all of them. And in the restructuring, we just couldn't have everyone leave the organization. We had to have business continuity. So when we did the job analysis, we identified the jobs that we wanted, which were very different from the jobs that existed then. And then we identified the number of people that we needed in those jobs, and of course the talent in those jobs. And it's the talent that we had to work on, and we had to build that talent in the organization, even as we continue to function. So how did we do it? We worked with a partner. We went through the normal process of seeking this out, and we worked with a partner to develop and implement this process, which enabled employees to gain recognition and credit for what they already knew and what they could do. So it was very evidential. And we established a competency-based system, which was linked to appointments. It was used for performance assessments, and it was used for competency evaluation and also for certification. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And it is the prior learning assessment and recognition method that Dr. Driver talked about, and that is what was utilized for the purpose. Now, this was utilized in PowerGen, as I said, in 1997 to 1999. It is still in the organization. And a similar process, I also spearheaded the implementation of a similar process in the airline industry that was called Competency Assurance System. The tenets are the same. In the airline industry, it was highly regulated, so that had to be incorporated there. At the time that we implemented this in PowerGen, which was, as I said, over 1997 to 1999, this process was only done in Grenada before that. And PowerGen was really the first organization in Trinidad and Tobago where this was implemented. Since then, of course, it has been implemented in many organizations in the oil and gas industry and even outside of the oil and gas industry. And, it really has stood the test of time, and it works very well. Okay, I hear that. So it was used to create, if you go to the next slide, please. The prior learning assessment and recognition system was used to create technical and business occupational standard for each occupation. So we assess the employees against an industry and occupational standard, and then we gave them credit for what they had. And we implemented this in conjunction with the University of Trinidad and Tobago, which was used as a credentialing body. If we can go to the other slide, please, and I'll show you the method, the diagram, which gives you a visual of how this process worked. So the first thing you had to do in establishing this method in the organization was to develop do the competency mapping and to identify the standards for each occupation and for each job. And that is what on the left side there you would see called a DACUM. DACUM means developing a curriculum. So each occupation had to have the identification of what had to be done and to the standard. And for the standard, we use a scale, because it could be very critical to the job, or it could be something that you just needed to do. And having done that, then we had to put all the employees through an assessment. So we had to assess where you are, because we have to take you somewhere. So we wanted to know, where are you today? And we documented that in a very rigorous way. And there were all the templates and everything associated with the method for doing that. And then they were validated. Those competencies were validated, and they were validated using a competency committee. That committee involved, it had HR in it, it had subject matter experts, it had internal verifiers, external verifiers. So we had to say, okay, given that this is what you have, these are the skills that you have, this is what you can do, let's validate that and capture that. And then now we know where they want to be, where we want to take them. So we identify the gap and we developed a personalized training program for them. And then over a period of time, because as I said, this was integrated with a job analysis and a job design. So you would have an employee who may be validated as a technician 1, and we know that that has a certain amount of skills and competencies, and a technician 2 would have a different set of skills and competencies, but leading off from 1 and even 1 to 3, where you have even higher level competencies. So depending on where you are, that person could be having a personalized training plan to take him from level 1 to level 2. And when that person is ready, and that could be like between 12 to 18 months, and having undertaken a lot of programs on the workplace. It could be tests, it could be demonstrations, it could be on the job qualification, on the job experiences. It could be classroom learning. We also had, at that time, it was 1999, we didn't have the streaming kind of systems that we have now, but we had a lot of training on DVDs and CDs that the employee can go online and access it. And all of that form part of his or her personalized learning program. And when they were ready, and when the supervisor indicated that they were ready, then they presented themselves for an assessment. And if they met the standards that were set, they were certified as either a level 1 technician or a level 2 technician, and so on. So people who didn't even have an MET or a triple ET could be certified as having these standards. And if we go to the next slide, we will just quickly see the process and how it goes, and you can let the full slide come up. So it starts with the development of the curriculum, which is the DACAM. We assess candidates, we validate what they have, we put a stamp on that, and then we know from here you have to get to somewhere else. Then we prepare those development plans, and over a period of time, they go through a process of learning on the job, online, in classrooms, but each person had a personalized development plan. And then came the assessment for the purpose of certifying them. And that was done in conjunction with UTT. The UTT worked with us in order to give accreditation, if I may use that word, to the person when they had to move from a level 1 to a level 2. And they would have given them a competency assurance certificate, a certificate, sorry, of acquired competency, and which said that you have met the requirements to move from level 1 to level 2. And that certificate was a standard which would allow them, if they were not in PowerGen but in another organization, it was recognized. It was portable, and we knew that it was at a particular standard. And of course, we had to ensure as we went along that that we had high qualities, and the system was rigorous in terms of how it was implemented. And if we move to the other slide, please, I'll talk quickly about the benefits to the different stakeholders. Certainly for the employees, it provided career and personal development. So you had a number of employees who, as Dr. Driver said, didn't have qualifications, but they now had a certificate of acquired competency. And we, in industry, we understood what that was. It was portable, it could go to another organization. Employers, they got the highest value from the investment in training. It helped with establishing succession plans and career plans for organizations. And it also helped with assessing people in the field and in the occupation that they were in. And for UTT, what did it help? I imagine it helped with improving connections between the business and industry, and of course, increasing the potential for research and development, ensuring quality control of the validation process, and aligning the curricula. This was a really good benefit that we got, and it was mutually beneficial for UTT and for PowerGen, in that it aligned the curricula with industry standards. So they kept current with what it is industry needed in those operations and maintenance jobs, particularly in the power industry. And if we go to the other slide, which is the last slide, we see that, you know, traditionally, academic degrees have been used as a proxy for skills and knowledge, the skills and knowledge needed to perform on the job. But we know now that competency-based credentialing can complement this. We have had persons who have come into the organizations with degrees, and we know that they are not the ones who will hit the ground running. But these employees who have gone through this system, they can hit the ground running every step of the way. And the training was designed in little modules, small bits that they can go on and do something and get that indication that, okay, I've passed this level, and then I can move on to another level. So we feel that if equivalency of knowledge and skills can be demonstrated through evidence, then that academic credit can also be granted for it. And both PLA, which is what is done at PowerGen, and CAS, they give reward for providing evidence of competency in a particular skill. And that reward is that the employee who now is demonstrating higher skills in the organization is rewarded at a higher level by way of salaries and so on. We recognize that learning comes from multiple sources, and learning is not just the academic degrees, but also that evidence-based learning. And we had systems in place as part of the PLA process for them to show us when we were going through validation, show us what you know. Do a walk down, let's observe something. So it was very, very evidential. And because it is incremental, it lends itself to micro-credentialing. And what can an organization like ACTT provide in this regard? I think that we probably have a system right now where there is no organizing body at the national level which says, how could we take all of these, things that are happening at the industry level, what Dr. Driver talked about, what Methanex is sponsoring, and that plea process. How can we take all of that and look at it and look at the broad perspective and say, what standards should we put in place? If an organization is doing this, then what should be the expectations of employees? What should be the role of the credentialing body if it is University of the West Indies, UTT? And I think there's a role for UTT, for ACTT there to kind of get in and organize that and give us a framework within which we can work. We want to know the language, everybody should be using the same language. The quality standard should be established, and all the information should be out there, and that should inform policy at a national level. So that is the experience that I wanted to share with you. We had a need, we've sought out a solution, we implemented it. Employees will benefited from it, and I think that it provides a lot of opportunity for that coexistence and a stronger relationship between industry and academia, and these credentialing, taking out these programs, these competency-based programs in the organization, and having some academic organization assign some kind of credential to it, as was done in PowerGen. I think there's a lot of potential for it, but of course it has to be done in a very organized way. There must be some rigor to it, and I see a role for ACTT there.
Thank you, Dr. Guy. At this time, we will entertain questions for the presenters. Be reminded to utilize the question feature to place your questions, and we ask all presenters to turn on their cameras. I now invite Mr. Prime to field questions.
Thank you, Madam Master of Ceremonies. So the first question will go to Dr. Driver, and it will be in two parts. The first one is, what fraction or percentage of training is done in the certification process when compared to PLAR?
I'm not quite sure if I understand the question, but what percent of what's the population we're talking here? I'm not quite sure I understand what's being asked.
I'll repeat the question again. What fraction or percentage of training is done in the certification process when compared to PLAR? So that was the question that came through.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what the question is referring to there.
Okay,
I'm not sure what the two things we're
comparing. For this question, and I'll go on to the second one that I'll pose to you.
I think if I can give some clarification.
Sure,
Dr. Driver, if I could put the question in another way, is there a cap on the percentage that you would give for prior learning? Is there a cap on the amount of prior learning a worker can get certification for, as opposed to training? So how much, if I come in with a skill set that I have evidence for, how much of that would be given in terms of a cap for prior learning assessment, and how much would be for training?
Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry. Thank you for restating the question. This is
You're
not my world, and so obviously the language sometimes I may not be understanding. Look, these assessments we're doing here are not assessments where people are coming with any training certification in them. They're areas where people are having to just to demonstrate their skills. So it's not that they will get credits for prior training. They have to be able to show, because you may have a degree in engineering, but if you can't show that you can actually do that hands-on work, the measurements, the cutting, or whatever it is, or welding to code, or how to erect the scaffolding, or how to do a toolbox meeting before you start the work. Having a degree doesn't make any difference. So it's all entirely for the PLAR work that we're doing here with these job standards. It's entirely through that. There's you don't get any credits for having any certification. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Dr. Driver. And again, this one is related to the award of badges. Regarding the award of badges, are these determined and executed by human intervention, such as the facilitator, or are they computer generated by artificial intelligence?
No, so what we're talking about here with the PLAR work we're doing with NESC is that is generated by the assessor who watches the person do the job, takes notes, and determines whether they can or can't do the job, and that is the transcript which they will produce. So it's done by human observation and not by artificial intelligence. The learning center I was talking about, that we have, the computer-based center we have here in Point Lisas, obviously the assessments which are done there, that's done, it's obviously entirely computer-based. And it is simply multiple choice type questions. So you'll do a little bit of a little unit of some training, of some knowledge, and then I'll ask you some questions, and then you'll respond to those questions to show whether you understood that unit of knowledge. If it does, it'll move you on to the next little unit of knowledge, and it'll take you through. And these are perhaps 2 or 3 hour long training courses. And at the end of it, then you have an assessment, which might take half an hour, which might be 50 questions and a multiple choice. And obviously that generates straight at the end of it whether you pass or you fail, and then we'll issue you the card straight there. And so when you leave the learning center and you pass the test, you walk out with the card in your hand.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ferdinand-James, this is a nice one, and it relates to badges, the same badges that we're talking about here. Are badges recognized by UE for employment of faculty and staff?
So we do have the system in place with the Open Campus where their badges are validated. And so, for example, as myself, I had to, as Dr. Luz indicated, the only way I can get to work as a coordinator or a course facilitator was if I had accomplished or achieved the number of badges in the various skill sets for online learning. And so when I did that, I was then able to secure a part-time position. I cannot speak for the rest of the faculties in terms of them issuing badges, but we do have that formal certification of micro-credentials established through the Open Campus, so that if faculty would want to go that way, you can get a micro-credential in course room facilitation, etc. Online assessment, you can do those if those are the skill sets that you need immediately for delivering your virtual learning.
Thank you, Dr. Ferdinand-James. Dr. Guy, how are you?
I'm here, yes.
Right, so I have a 2-part question. The first one is, do you see organizations in Trinidad and Tobago being ready with essential competencies to work in a flexible and virtual space?
And you say ready with essential competencies, yeah, to work
in a flexible and virtual space.
organizations. Okay, yeah, I'll take that one, and then you could give me the other one.
Sure.
Unless they're related. Yeah, right. You know, when we had the experience with COVID early this year, February, March, and you know, we looked around from an HR perspective. We looked around at how organizations responded to it. I would say, from my perspective, I was happy to see, for the most part, quick responses. You know, organizations mobilized, they did their, you know, staff rotations, and what they thought they couldn't do and probably had on a strategic plan to happen over the next 12 to 24 months, suddenly, instead, you know, they were just doing it. They got together and they were just doing it. So it shows you that they could mobilize if it is they want. And I feel that, you know, for the most part, if we have the will, and we put our minds together, we could get things done. A lot of organizations are already using competency-based management systems. I know a lot of organizations in the oil and gas are using these prior learning assessment and recognition systems, and they are using systems to certify what people know, what people can do, more so than what they know. Because for a very long time, we have been looking at what do people know, but sometimes there's a big gap between what people know and what they can do. And these competency-based systems, they allow us to assess what people can do. And that is what is important. There might be some work to be done in some organizations. Sometimes the public service lags a bit in some areas, and sometimes they are the ones who pull us ahead. So there's a mix of it. But for the most part, I think that organizations can do this and can move along. And we have seen that with the COVID experience. And the second question?
Mr. Prime, if I could just interject here.
Sure.
Dr. Guy, could you tell us, as it relates to the previous question that was asked, what percentage is given to the prior learning in terms of certifying an individual? We know they have to go through training, but what is there a cap on the amount of credit given when you assess prior learning?
Right. So with us, it didn't work like that at all. Now, we had it had to happen in two phases. You see, for the existing employees who were there in 1997, 1999, who some of them did not have that MET, that triple ET, in, you know, which going forward was an entry requirement to come into the organization, but some of them didn't have it. But when we defined what a level 1 technician was and what a level 2 technician was, yes, you included in there an MET or a triple ET. But in order to move from one to the next, all they had to show was evidence of being able to satisfy what was in that DACOM, what was in that curriculum. So the qualifications later on were only used to get in the door. And that qualification now will allow us, and it will help the employee in terms of how much he or she had to do. Because sometimes with the qualification, you would have done things that could help you go through the levels in the competency-based system a lot faster than if you didn't have it. But there was no cap. All we assessed was, can you do what this job requires you to do? Yeah.
Thank
you. So there's no percentage, yes.
Okay, Dr. Guy, the second part of the question is what kinds of micro-credentials will be recommended for training institutions to prepare our local workforce for virtual work?
For virtual, what kind of micro-credentials would be
recommended for training institutions to provide in order to prepare our local workforce for virtual work?
Well, okay, perhaps I'm seeing that, I'm interpreting that question from the point of view of, okay, our academic institutions, how can we prepare those persons who deliver programs to deliver that in such a way that our employees can do what they have to do? Is that what you're asking? You're saying kinds of micro-credentialing Is it from the
Yes,
perspective of the lecturers?
that could be one way of interpreting the question.
Yeah, that's how I am interpreting it. And I'm seeing that happening in one organization that I'm associated with, Cipriani College. They really quickly moved to bringing their programs online. And, you know, they realized that this was, again, a plan that they had in their strategic plan. It was a goal to achieve. But COVID happened, and here quickly, Cipriani College had to move online. So all you do is you take the programs and you put them online, and you put your lecturers through, you know, a quick orientation and so on in order to get the thing going. But then after that, now you have to have a proper plan in place in order to keep that going. And, you know, that is where, you know, they are now in terms of preparing the lecturers as to how to deliver it. But more than that, taking the programs themselves and having to break up the programs into maybe different bits and bytes, and to see how that could be delivered. Because Cipriani is one organization where, you know, on the online learning system really is our students are telling us this is what we want. We really don't care to come back into the classroom. If there are programs where we have to, we will. But for the most part, we have an adult population, student population. And for the most part, we just want to do our classes online. So it means that we have to prepare the lecturers as to how this has to be delivered, and we are sourcing ways to do that. And we also have to look at the programs themselves to see how they could be broken up into, you know, those little nuggets that they could be delivered. And then, of course, have that whole system and that whole framework certified and accredited by an organization like ACTT. So that is something that we have to work on.
Yes, and that is exactly what major environmental forces do to you. Force you to change so that you would be able to continue to deliver your mandate. Dr. Guy, Dr. Driver, Dr. Ferdinand-James, thanks a lot.